Welcome back to Town Manager's Corner. My name is Scott Lambiasi and I'm your town manager. And as most of you know, Town Manager's Corner is just a series of clips where I go around, meet different department heads or different departments, sometimes committees, and we ask them, what's going on? What are they doing? What's topical? Maybe we'll discuss some issues that are going on, or we'll just discuss what's going on in the department. Anyways, today we have a couple special guests. We have our new water superintendent, Kristel Cameron, and with her, Tara McManus from Weston Sampson is here. So very pleased to introduce you to and welcome to Town Manager's Corner.
It's nice to be here. Thank you.
So Kristel, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, your background, and what brought you into the waterworks?
Sure. So I have a environmental science degree and from Westfield State College, in addition to a geography and regional planning degree. So I went to school for it, and I did an internship for a little while in Abington, Rockland Joint Waterworks, and decided to stay on board when they were looking for an operator. So I got on board. I worked for a couple years as an operator and then got promoted to chief operator. And I did that position for about 16 years and then was promoted to assistant super in 2019. And then then I went from assistant super to superintendent.
Mm-hmm.
Yep, about 3 months ago.
Wow, and a good smooth transition, I'm assuming.
Yeah, it's been busy,
Yeah.
but I mean, I'm not, this isn't an unfamiliar territory for me, so yeah, it's been busy, but.
And you knew,
different.
obviously, you've gone up through the ranks, so you knew exactly what you were walking into as far as age of the system, how the system works. Obviously, we have some issues, not so much with the system, but just with water in general, supply, demand, and certainly, one of the big things, and one of the things that we get asked a lot is, about the quality and the new regulations that have come into effect.
Sure.
And, but before we talk about that, just a couple other things. So Abington, Rockland Joint Waterworks. So you're dealing with two towns. You're dealing with two finance committees, two town meetings, two budgets. Everything, I guess, is pretty much evenly split down the middle. But that's a lot for a department head. Tell us a little bit about that adventure.
I'm getting used to it. It's definitely a lot to manage, but it's not something that's that I can't do. But it's two of everything, so it's it's great. But
double the meetings, double the fun.
Right, yeah, and it's they split it. It's not always 50-50. A lot of it's based on commitments. So if Rockland's using more water than Abington, then it's not technically always split 50-50, but it's definitely two of everything. So it's busy, but I like busy. Busy's good. It makes the day go by fast. So yeah.
All right, and so like a couple of the issues that are at the forefront, I'm guessing. Well, first off, just curious, the infrastructure itself, is it aging infrastructure? Is it something that you've managed to keep up on?
It's definitely an old, aging infrastructure, but I think the past superintendents have done really well with replacing water mains as money's been available, grants and whatnot, and we'll continue to do that. But I think we have some other pretty pressing things on the table that we need to address. So we manage the aging infrastructure as we can. If we have water main breaks, we address those. But with aging water mains, you do have a tendency to have taste and odor issues and things like that. But we can deal with those with flushing and other ways of managing complaints and whatnot. But a lot of times we ask customers to call if they have issues so that we know what's going on in the system. Otherwise, we really don't know if people are having problems with their water. But usually taste and odor is one of the problems. Color, dirty water. that can be an indicator of an aging water main as well.
And another thing people ask constantly, and it's probably because we deal with these issues at town meeting. The voters vote on it when you want to buy some equipment, but it all comes out of this revolving or your fund, which is not tax based.
No.
It is rate based.
Correct.
It's basically a user fees.
Right. So when people pay their when customers pay their bills, that's what essentially funds our department. Taxes really have nothing to do with funding the department. So we use that money really to pay for chemicals, pay the electricity bills, pay fuel, things like that. Keep the water mains. When we make repairs to that, those water mains, that's where a lot of this funding goes to. The upkeep of the buildings, the wells, things like that. It's really important to have that flow of the money come in. So, when we increase the rates, a lot of times it's because we're trying to keep up with the times and the increase of the
expenses associated with
and whatnot.
Yeah.
Yep.
And even to the point that associated costs that the towns have are actually the towns are reimbursed for those expenses that are incurred outside of whether it be the accounting expenses or insurance expenses, stuff like that does get reimbursed to the town. So it really is truly paid by the user and based upon the amount of usage. So. Which brings us into sort of that whole supply-demand issues that we have that, we recently just went through a drought. I'm not sure if we're still in it. I'm guessing at least a moderate drought at this point.
I would say so, yeah.
And so that led we basically had an outdoor watering ban, and most likely we'll see that, I'm guessing, every summer for the foreseeable future.
Right.
But tell us a little bit about that, about supply and demand. And I know you both have been working on that issue.
So with the supply and demand, we have a permit, withdrawal permit, that tells us really how much water we can take from the reservoirs at a certain period of time. So usually it's within a yearly period that we can take just a certain amount, like I said before, of water from the reservoir, or the well field. Technically, we're not supposed to go over that limit. There's certain things that we can do in order to mitigate and provide more water, so we can do conservation efforts, mitigation, things like that. But there is this happy medium of water bans, and then also encouraging development at the same time. So I know that it's sometimes people get upset about, well, we have a water ban, but you're still, allowing development. But it's something that the DEP, the state, they like to see that. It's something that's in our withdrawal permit that, it's not just all gung-ho water and we're not allowed to, you're not supposed to promote development. You're supposed to try to kind of balance both of those.
And you're putting forward some really unique, not unique, but some really great initiatives to work with developers for conservation purposes. You want to talk about that?
Sure. It's going to be a future effort. We haven't implemented it just yet, but a lot of times when developers, they put in a development, they have to pay some fees. And those mitigation fees, we're calling them now, they're a water balancing mitigation fee, where they pay us a fee, we put it in a fund, and eventually once that fund gets big enough, we will hire a plumber and then advertise to the community. If they would if residents would like to replace their toilets or aerators or shower heads, we'll have a plumber come in and replace that for them free of cost. So those fees that we're collecting from these developers are actually going to be put towards conservation mitigation. So that's really what the water department's really going to be focusing on for the near future, is trying to find more water, really.
Yeah, find more and just be more careful with it, I think.
Correct,
is
yeah.
our message and that's to everyone. I mean, you know, and I know we probably see the PSAs all the time of, you know, don't run the faucet when you're shaving, don't run the faucet when you're brushing your teeth. But are there other things that, you know, folks could be doing? Like you said, I know an aerator, would you put that on all the sinks, or is that just, you know, like the kitchen sink, or?
Sure. Yeah, I would think you should have them on all your sinks. I mean, the biggest thing I think that I see during the summer, spring, fall is irrigation. It's really something that we would love to see a lot less of. You know, we would love to see people use the water for, you know, consumption, showering. We'd like to have it in reserve for firefighting. Those are the things that are important. I mean, I understand people love to have green lawns, you know, but I would prefer Mother Nature do that for us rather than
Remember, the more you water it, the more you have to cut it.
So, but you know, having the irrigation running at you know, during the summer when we're in, you know, a heat wave and we really don't have the water. I mean, if we're drawing out of puddle at this point over in Rockland and in Pembroke, where our two surface water treatment plants are, and it's just, you drive by and you see people watering their lawns. It's really something that we wish we would see a lot less of.
And does it matter if somebody puts in their own irrigation well? Does that still just draw from the same source ultimately, or is that better?
I mean, I would think that it's a little bit better, but I still think it would probably be drawing from the same aquifer. And I do think at some point, correct me if I'm wrong, but DEP does have the ability to shut down even private wells if it gets really bad. I'm not sure if I'm...
They're attempting to. So private wells are typically unregulated in that sense. If it's just for irrigation, I should say. If it's drinking water, that's another story,
Right.
and you definitely would want to keep things separate. But it is still all one large aquifer here. So having multitude of private wells would certainly be a degradation to the environment as well. So, you know, the hope is that, you know, folks move away from the greenscapes to a little bit more hardscapes or other decorative options to kind of reduce the amount of grass that they need. And I think the primary thing is that, you know, you see people, watering their lawn at 2 o'clock in the afternoon at the peak sun time. It's actually killing your lawn more so that way with the you know. It's evaporating, number one, but also the sunlight is actually baking your water droplets to actually heat your lawn too at that point. So it would be better to, you know, certainly do it in off-peak time periods and certainly in cooler periods when the ground can actually absorb it too. So so there's a lot of conservation information that can be found on the website.
Good. Well, I think, you know, we've talked about the supply and we've talked about the intros, but you know, the big question and sort of the overall issue that's looming out there is the PFAS and the PFAS chemicals and the testing for it. So do you want to give us a brief history, a brief overview on sort of how that all came about? Because I know it's something that you've tested for before. It's not like we haven't been testing. It's just that the, I guess, sort of that benchmark has changed.
Sure. So like you said, we've tested for years for this. I believe that it was either 2013 or was it 03? I'm not off the top of my head.
The initial start was UCMR 3, which is the term for the EPA requesting every water system across the country for testing, and Abington, Rockland, Joint Water All Sources were non-detect at the time, and testing parameters have gotten a little bit more stringent as far as, you know, what you can test down to those levels. And I think the biggest thing when we talk about these levels is we're talking about parts per trillion, and it's basically like 1 droplet of water in 20 Olympic-sized swimming pools. I mean, this is something very minute. So it's difficult to get the accuracy, and even now that we're testing to Mass DEP standard of 20 parts per trillion for a total of 6 of these polyfluoral.
So that would be like 6 drops of water?
It's pretty small amount. Yeah, it's so
in these giant pools.
And okay. You know, the labs right now the majority of the labs out there can only test to you know, they're anything below like 2 or 3 or so is kind of insignificant or non accurate enough to kind of report. So So that's the tough part, is that the testing parameters can be anywhere from 20 to 30% accurate with these, and why we're seeing a little bit, sometimes we're at 15, sometimes we're at 25, and the parameter is 20 that they're trying to meet right now at the Hingham Street Reservoir, which is located in Rockland.
Now, just to stop. So that is the PFAS issue is something that definitely is at the forefront of everybody's mind right now. But other water quality issues, you actually have some very good quality water.
We do.
There really are no other issues, right?
I mean, I think aside from, your normal everyday water complaints, sometimes people might have a taste and odor issue. That's a typical distribution, water complaint. You can go out, we'll go out to a person's home and sample their water sometimes. Sometimes it's as simple as someone accidentally didn't realize it was coming from their drain and not the faucet. Some other times it's we need to open up a hydrant to get the flow because a dead end. Sometimes odor has a tendency to stay there because it's not flowing, the water.
But you test for everything under the sun.
Everything coming out of the treatment plant is great. It's just sometimes when it leaves the treatment plant, it has a tendency to run into some other issues when it goes out into the distribution system.
Sediment or
right.
If fire, the direction of flow changes. It can stir up the turbidity in the water system and cause some dirty water complaints or whatnot.
So now, at some point, they made the standard much more strict on the PFAS, and that's basically where we are today. And you continually test. How is it, like just every day, constantly you're testing?
For PFAS, it's quarterly. It's monthly for Hingham Street in Rockland. It's quarterly for Sandy Bottom, which is in Pembroke, and I believe Tom's doing quarterly for Myers Ave, even though it's not required. But and he actually might be doing monthly sometimes. He's doing extra sampling over at Myers Ave. But we have some GAC filters over at Myers Ave that are removing the PFAS to undetected at this point right now. So
and that's predominantly feeding the Abington residents.
Yep.
And so you have filters in place.
Yep.
On all the plants?
Just in Abington right now. So Abington, we kind of found the PFAS there by accident, just by happenstance really. We were trying to get a well online. Not actually online. We were getting it ready to see if we could get it online, and we were doing a flow test, and the way that the DEP, they like us to sample and test the water before you get it ready to get put online, and we found the PFAS there. So they wanted us to sample all the other wells, and just out of an abundance of caution, we just shut the plant down because we were like, there's a good possibility it could be in the other wells. This was before the regulation was dropped to 20, so this was still when we were at 70. The results were right around 30. So we were still
well below
the level, but we knew that eventually the level was going to be dropped to 20, so we just wanted to play it safe and shut the plant down. We did that. We did the renovations. It's a lot easier to renovate a groundwater treatment plant for PFAS than it is for a surface water. So we were able to do that rather quickly. I mean, when I say that, it's about a year. It took 10 months, I think.
Which is, you put in giant stainless steel.
It was actually already there. So we took the media out of one of the pressure filters that we have there, and we replaced it with the special media that you need. It's called GAC, granular activated carbon. We just replaced the media that was there with that media, and it does
modified.
the job.
There's four vessels, and we changed the process a little bit to kind of have 3 vessels go through that one then, and reduce the flow rate a little bit.
And how often do you change the media?
It's going to take, it's roughly about every year. So
Once a year?
maybe, I think
We
the way
went
that
about
it's
10
going to
months
work
before we considered a certain level to be, time to at least start ordering and getting ready to replace. And I think it was about 10 to 12 months after that that it was ready to go back online after the first setup we had.
So mostly, I mean, I guess what sort of brings everybody, out is they'll get their notice. When you do all of a sudden have that above 20, you have to send out a notice.
We do.
And it doesn't happen often, but when it does happen, it does make everybody look and say, why am I getting this notice? And the notice is very, by DEP regulations or standards, it's a very technical notice, so it just looks, even if it said everything was okay, you wouldn't know it.
Right.
Because,
Yes. There's not many notices that are easy to decipher, that's for
Right.
sure, unfortunately, but they're required language that we have to include, yeah.
Yeah, they give us a template and we have to
you
pretty
have
much
to
use
fill in the
it.
blanks.
Right, so in order to make things a little bit easier for people to understand, we're working on, we should have a website up and going, I would say, by the end of the week or next week, with, you know, a little bit, it's a little easier to understand. But the information is right off the DEP website, so.
And I've posted on the Town of Abington website, we sort of had my version of some frequently asked questions that I've put my answers to that are not official because DEP might not like what I have to say, but luckily, they're just, again, a lot of the things that we're just discussing right now and just, you know, sort of reiterating that, you know, we do filter the water, you do monitor it, you are below the standards most of the time. It's that occasional issue. And any idea what causes that occasional spike?
It can be, honestly, we really don't know. It could just be the low reservoir, to be honest with you, it could be that. They really honestly don't know. And like Tara said, the samples are not always all that accurate either. So it really, they really don't know. It could just be what's in the water at the time.
We're right around the average, which is around the 20 mark, which is unfortunate in a sense with that's the limit. But if the limit was 30, there'd be no issues right now. But that's where we're at, and that's what we're attempting to work with the Joint Waterworks on remedy to be in compliance with DEP. And I think the important thing is to realize that it is a long-term health advisory, so it's a concern of over a lifetime of consumption of a significant amount of water, actually, of what could be considered something that might be a health impact. And for certain more vulnerable populations, I mean, those folks would probably want to do a little bit more research and talk to their doctors, or might want to take other extra precautions if they're concerned about things. It's one of those situations where it's not an acute health hazard. You know, sometimes you get a notice and you're like, oh, I need to boil my water. I mean, that's actually not what this is saying here.
Nor would it help.
Right.
Yeah. So that it's one of those. It's what these forever chemicals have been around for 50 plus years, and unfortunately, it's not anything that Joint Waterworks has done wrong. They've just eventually, you know, what our consumption of utilizing everything in our daily lives has eventually gotten into the water systems and into our water sources. And the surrounding areas, I mean, everybody's tested over 20, at least in the surrounding areas, at least at one of their sources, and are taking precautionary measures to remedy that through treatment.
Now, is it unique to Massachusetts, New England, the East Coast, or
So across the world, it's in the air, you know, rain, it's
other water
yeah.
departments are having these same issues
Exactly.
throughout the
Unfortunately,
country?
but yes, yeah.
And that's
Mass is
probably
very stringent, so
yeah,
it's
but
at the
and,
20.
and I'm guessing that's leading to some of the problems with getting media for it or doing the
Right.
upgrades, because we've allocated a lot of money,
Right.
close to $30 million between the two towns, 20-something million at last town meeting. So
Right, yeah. Yep.
so we've allocated a lot of money towards upgrades, specifically towards, you know, filtering and yeah, I'm guessing monitoring too. But so you're working
Yeah.
diligently.
We are.
You know, ultimately though, what we're saying here is unless you're immunocompromised or your doctor says otherwise, the water is fine.
Yeah, we would say that, you know, as the state is taking the stance that if, you know, you don't fall into one of those sensitive subgroups, you're not pregnant, you're not breastfeeding, you're not making formula for an infant, you know, you can continue to consume the water with less risk. So, you know, and if you don't feel comfortable with that, and if you do fall into one of those sensitive subgroups, per the regulation, we have to offer another source of water. So you'll see some communities, they've done bottled water, which a lot of them have stopped doing that because it, you know, turned into a big situation where you have people from other towns going and getting the water, and you know, it's a lot of waste with the plastic and a lot of cost.
And again, I had asked that before we started, was,
Exactly.
most of this water seems to come from, whether it's Nestle's or PepsiCo or something like that, but they have different requirements for testing, and they
And
may
not all bottled water is tested,
No.
to the regulation of Massachusetts. So there's that too. And then, there's another, we could have done tanker trucks in with water, and we were concerned about how long the water was going to be in the tanker truck for, and if, would it be gross or, sitting there for a long time. So, and the turnover in the tank. So we didn't want to have to, and then having someone sit there and monitor it and make sure that, that was watched. So, and then we have a perfectly good source, Great Sandy Bottom over in Pembroke. As long as we could demonstrate that the hydraulics of that water was making it to the source and the tap that we were going to provide for the public, we could use that source as that other source of water. So we did some testing. We have a hydraulic model done. That was done before this whole situation arose. So we were able to provide enough data for the state to allow us to say that Great Sandy Bottom is feeding the office at 366 Center Ave. And those testing results have been well below the limit. They've been consistently below 10, well below 7 actually, ever since we started testing. So
anybody could just come to your office, bring a plastic bottle or metal jar, whatever they prefer to bring, and they can fill up right there.
Yep.
Okay.
Whether or not you feel, if you're immunocompromised or if you're just not comfortable, you're more than welcome to come by. I will say hydraulically though, the majority of Abington does not get the water from this source that has the issue. The reason why we had to send out these notices to everybody was because of the possibility, because we have what's called like an interconnected system where we don't have gates in the system where just, Hingham Street Water Treatment Plant feeds this one area and the water can never get out of that one area. We do know typically though, hydraulically, that the water goes to certain places. So it's the way that the DEP explained it to me was if something happened like a catastrophic event where a water main break, changed the directionality of the water, or a huge fire or something like that, and the hydraulics changed where someone who was normally typically getting a certain source might get something different, having everybody understand what's going on by getting these notices and being informed that's the way that the DEP wanted us to handle it. So everybody should get a notice just in case, but typically Abington does not get the water from from Hingham Street Water Treatment Plant. It's either Myers Ave or Great Sandy Bottom, and both of those sources are in good shape.
So they're not likely getting anything that's above the guidelines, but because it's all one system, everybody's getting the notice.
Right, and if they ever did, I would have to say that it was it would be a blended source anyways, between, and that's one of actually, one of the techniques that the DEP allows systems to do is a blended source, so you can, in order to get below the level, the limit.
Diluting if you had a...
So that's, anybody in Abington would most likely have a blended source if they were getting the Hingham Street water anyways. So it would be below 20.
Now, I know recently Abington, the town Abington, we signed on with a law firm, and I believe that Waterworks, the Joint Waterworks, is done so separately because there is litigation against the manufacturers of these PFAS chemicals. And I'm assuming, somewhere, someday that flushes out and they're going after companies like 3M and DuPont and, Dow and Johnson and whatever. That money, is that to go into remediation for this? Is it to any, if there is ever money, is it just to sort of pay back the waterworks for the filtering systems? Any idea how that will end up?
I'm not sure really
Flushing
how
out, so to
much,
speak?
what we would do with it. I've been told it's going to take a long time to have anything come of that, but I'm sure it would most definitely be put to good use. It would probably be to,
There's historically, for situations like this, it does take a lot of time, and finding responsible parties can be very difficult if they're even around still. So if they're specific to one region, This is a much larger conglomerate, so similar to other action lawsuits where everybody would get a piece of that final settlement if there was something that came about. And then certainly the intent would be to push back into the water system. I mean, any monies that were spent, the hope would be that they would be found culpable for that amount of money and hopefully reimbursed. But
because cleanup doesn't sound like that's a possibility, that we're going to find a source. At this point, the source is everywhere.
In different cases, firefighting foam is something that's a significant contributor. So folks that live around air bases that might have private wells or public wells
Hey, we
or
have one of
whatnot.
those.
There's and so the location can be very, very impactful. So you can actually treat the groundwater to kind of stop it and from spreading, if you will. But in many cases, landfills, there's so many different things that it could be coming from. Traveling down through rivers and streams, eventually from upstream, wherever discharges were before, that eventually does settle into different aquifers. So the unfortunate part is that it's been going on for decades and decades, and it's just now starting to become an issue where folks are noticing it, and or at least the federal guidelines have indicated that we need to start checking for it a little bit more, and now Massachusetts has decided to become a little bit more stringent and really hone in on the top 6 concerning substances.
Have the manufacturers of these products, like Teflon and whether it was in any clothing or not, have they worked that out, that they're not?
A lot of the larger organizations know that that's something that they need to stop using. So, for instance, a lot of laundry detergents had been using it. So then it's on your clothes. It's anti-stick. It's anti-flammable. It's anything that's makes it nice and slick and beads off. Those are all things that have these compounds in them. So, microwave popcorn to Teflon pans to carpets to, a lot of children's clothing had it because it was, that's a really good fire. If you don't get a nice little onesie on there, and you want to make sure, right? So it all comes off, but over time, many of the manufacturing firms have taken it upon themselves, and right now the federal government is attempting, and many, across the world, there's different countries that we get a lot of our products from that are not regulated at all. So. So to stop it completely is a little hard, but if we created these chemicals, so they're here, and the whole goal is at this point to try to mitigate your risk. So if you are in a population that has some concerns, check out other things that you might be using in your daily lives. As Kristel mentioned before, it's in a lot of things. I mean, it's the testing parameters for when they have to go test, they're not allowed to shower for a few days. They're no makeup, certainly don't go fill your gas tank or anything like that,
so
or
not
anything.
the one taking the samples, but.
So it's a just in case, and certainly for taking it from a river stream, a lot of clothing is water resistant. So you have to be very careful on how you take those samples, because we are talking about such minute particles that it becomes very, very concerning to just even have a glove on that might have something on it. So. But yeah, it is in a lot of our daily lives, and we are probably coming into contact in many different parameters. But because everybody drinks water, for the most part, everybody drinks water. It is something that it can be one of the options that the Mass DP and EPA can regulate. So it's something to consider risks on other levels. I got rid of all my Teflon pans years ago, but. Certainly doesn't, the packaging of all of our foods when we get to-go packages and stuff. I mean, there's, I don't microwave that anymore, So,
right.
So there's just different things that you can do to mitigate your risk, I guess, on many levels of our personal daily lives.
Yeah, I always think of it on like a point system. We were just talking about this before we got here. Water's on that point system, and that's why, we're here today, talking about this situation. But there's so many things that PFAS is in. That we gotta, you can limit your risk. So, but getting back to the sampling and stuff, we do have people that when they collect the samples, they can't shower. We got to be careful on what we're wearing, how you touch things. There are customers that ask, can you come to my house and sample for PFAS? We don't know what kind of line you have in your house, where the Teflon is in that line. A lot of plumbers use Teflon, so that could, I think there was at one point we were labeling the bottles with permanent marker. It's in permanent marker. So we had to completely throw out samples and start over again because of that risk. It's just stuff you don't think about that really is kind of mind-blowing.
Well, at least we know about it, and we're working towards fixing it. And for the most part, you have the filters are set up. We're working on more filtering.
Yep.
The money's there. The money's been allocated, and really, it's more a matter of getting equipment, supplies.
Right.
And it's a process. I mean, it's not something that
Permitting. I'm guessing DEP's probably not.
It's a lot of
the
paperwork.
easiest.
Yep. So it's definitely a process, but we're getting there. It's slow and steady though.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, is there anything else you'd love to tell anybody or tell everybody?
I think.
The general timeline. I mean, you talked about the funding by each town. We're working through the Massachusetts State Revolving Fund for the loan. It's going to be a 0% loan, and there also is going to be some principal forgiveness. And the application is in to the state, and then the next step is just getting approval of the overall construction project, both at Myers Ave and at Hingham Street, to make some important upgrades. The state requires a permanent PFAS solution, not just we're doing interim solutions and not full scale. So that is something that needs to be funded and move forward. So the hope is that we'll get approval to go out to bid this spring, start construction with a contractor, this summer, and then due to supply chain issues and other things, we're making attempts to use other funding sources to purchase filters in advance, possibly doing a small pilot over at Hingham Street in the interim, because it will likely take up to 2 years for construction. Just in general, just parts, generators, and electronics and things are anywhere from a year plus out at this point with manufacturing delays during COVID. So it was kind of a worst case scenario in a sense of the storm hitting with the regulations and then COVID hitting, but we've been taking steps to make that come to fruition as far as expediting as much as we can. So, and the first step was appropriating the funding. You can't go forward with the next step with the loan if you don't have the money up front.
Right.
So as of July 1, we were able to move forward and start to really start the planning process and get our applications in. So. It's and as Kristel mentioned, the limit has gone. We're at 20, but the test results have come in periodically below, sometimes above, and that's why the residents are all customers, whether they're property owners or water customers in both towns, are receiving the notification.
Great. Well, it sounds like we're working on it, and now I guess one last thing: is there anything else we can do for supply other than a really snowy winter? Because I didn't realize that with all the rains that we got, I thought, whoa, the drought's going to have to be over. We're going to have plenty of water. But now I find out that the best thing for supply is a snowy winter.
It's true.
And John Stone does not want to hear that.
I know. He probably hates to hear that, but that's the truth. That's where we get most of our recharge is the snow. So we're hoping for a big snowy winter, but just cutting back on using irrigation during the spring, summer, fall. I know that's pretty much over at this point, but don't let your water run while you're brushing your teeth. Just things like that. That's pretty much. And
I know again, like you had talked, there's a lot of initiatives that you're going to put forward with builders and commercial construction, and I know I've got some ideas that I've floated by you that maybe we could try. So we're going to do everything on our end to try and get people to conserve water as much and as a large scale as possible. But again, ultimately, it's up to the consumer to work with us. So anything else?
And just when we get that program going with the conservation efforts to replace toilets and things, we'd love to have people sign up.
Oh, great! Yeah, and we'll, maybe we'll have another episode, or we'll definitely get information on our website, and I'm sure you'll get it over there in Rockland. And the more we can do to get information out when that happens, we will.
Yeah, that's great.
So again, thank you guys. I really appreciate it. This has been great. I know everybody else is going to appreciate it. Sure. Again, it's always one of those topics that whether the notice comes out or maybe it's just their water bill, that usually raises some eyebrows too. So again, that's all for today, folks. Thank you for tuning in. We'll be back with another episode really soon, and take care.